Well, I think that China does see opportunity within crisis. The pandemic, of course, hit China first. There was domestic criticism at home of Xi Jinping and the party. And I think that the Chinese felt under pressure and wanted to use that opportunity to perhaps deflect attention abroad. But there's also something else going on here. It's paradoxical, and that is that China's response is also driven by worry that other countries could take advantage of perceived Chinese weakness and vulnerability due to the pandemic. And this is especially true on issues that pertain to questions of sovereignty, like Taiwan and Hong Kong. So I think that there are both things going on here. China is being more assertive, but at the same time, it's also defensive and afraid of being taken advantage of.
But when we look at the increased tensions, say, for example, on the China-India border, do you see that as more intentional by China?
Well, it's an interactive situation. The Chinese perceive that India has changed the status quo. India perceives that China has changed the status quo. The building of roads by both sides that would give the other a strategic advantage if they can permanently gain new positions along those borders, then that is seen by the other side as a change in the status quo and as a threat to their interests. But I think that the Chinese decided that they are not willing to sit back and watch India do what they are referring to as essentially salami slicing, taking positions that are putting China at a disadvantage. And the Chinese came in with new troops that had not been deployed there before, and they tried to put pressure on India. And we've now seen India push back.
And talking of that pushback, of course, Australia has done the same thing. It hasn't gone well. But do you think it should be happening in more strategic groupings in the region?
Well, that's a very important question. It's whether pushback is effective or whether it's counterproductive. And pushback is most effective, I think, when it's coordinated with other countries. After all, the Chinese really feel the formation of an anti-China coalition. They're probably quite surprised to hear so many countries simultaneously criticizing Chinese behavior. So that's, I think, the best way to perhaps convince China to recalibrate because they have been so assertive against so many countries simultaneously. And I think there are some voices in China that think that this is counterproductive to Chinese interests, but I don't see that coming from Xi Jinping.
Talking of Xi's hold on power, do you see anything that could change that, or could there be voices that could challenge him over the next couple of years?
Well, I think that Xi Jinping is in a very strong position in China, but he, like other Chinese leaders before him, always have to be concerned about the potential for elite criticism. Xi Jinping is probably vulnerable on some issues. Taiwan would be an example. If Taiwan were to be seen as separating itself from China, then there could be a lot of pressure on Xi Jinping domestically to do more to defend Chinese interests. So it's very difficult to know what is going on inside China. It really is a black box. But in 2022, Xi Jinping is going to face another party Congress. He will have finished 2 years. He has removed the limits on the 2 terms that had existed previously, so he can stay in power. But we can't rule out the fact that there might be some people in China who would like to see another leader.
How difficult is it for traditional allies of the United States to feel that they can count on them against China's rise in the region?
Well, I think that the United States has sent a lot of conflicting signals to the region. There are times when the United States looks to be very confrontational toward China, but then when it is asked to step up and take leadership on issues, It has refused to do so, and the World Health Organization and its withdrawal, I think, is a rather unfortunate symbol of the United States withdrawing from leadership positions. But that said, when it comes to military presence, we just saw 3 U.S. carriers in the Asia Pacific simultaneously, which we've not seen since 2017. We've seen stepped up exercises. We've seen more freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. So again, we really have seen conflicting signals. I think countries generally want to see more American diplomatic, economic, and military presence, and they want that to be consistent and dependable.
Our Prime Minister today also spoke of the risk of a miscalculation in the region. Do you see the possibility of a military conflict that involves China?
Well, there's always a potential for an accident between U.S. and Chinese military assets. That could escalate, or it might be controlled. I always look to the Korean Peninsula as a place where we could see a potential contingency, and China might well get involved. And really the most dangerous one is Taiwan. If China actually decides to use military force to take over Taiwan, I believe there is a high likelihood that the United States would get involved. So there's the risk of accident, and then there is the risk of deliberate war. And probably both of those are on the rise. Not very high, but when you're talking about the potential for a conflict between 2 nuclear powers, even if you're going from a 10 to a 20% risk, that's unacceptable.
Really great to have you on the program. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.